Bring you now some more analysis on his decision to quit, to leave the DA. I'm joined in the studio by political analyst Ivor Sarakinsky from the Wits School of Governance. Well, we here at ENCA, firstly, good morning, Ivor. Thank you very much for coming through. We here at ENCA, over the weekend, we were reliably informed that he's going to be resigning, so it was pretty much there, but you never know, I mean, in politics until it's done. Now, he has said many things, but just an overriding opening from you. I mean, what does this mean now?
It means that the DA is in deep turmoil at a range of levels, where you've got an important leader like Mr. Mashaba resigning under these conditions. It's an indicator of rough undercurrents.
Rough undercurrents. I mean, he said very clearly in the statement as it started, among many things, this DA is not the same any longer, that the same DA that I signed up for.
Well, that may well be his view. It's not clear whether that's the real reason why he's leaving or whether there are complementary and additional reasons that he hasn't taken us into his confidence with.
He mentioned a couple of other things, for example, indicating where his frustration has been.
Yes.
He said the DA, for instance, criticized his approach. And despite the fact that the DA only won 38% of the vote in Joburg in 2016, it wanted him to govern arrogantly.
Well, that's a subjective issue. Very difficult to be a minority government. So I think he does have a very valid point there. But then again, it comes down to how you do things, and how you manage those coalitions and how you manage those very difficult relationships across parties, etc. And maybe he wasn't as successful at that level as he's suggesting that he was. Alienating DA councillors who can't get resources to respond to their constituencies' needs because resources are being allocated elsewhere. Councillors getting heat leads to antagonism with inside the DA, and maybe those kinds of tensions weren't handled as well as they might have been.
But then he was saying in his speech, if I recall, one of the things he said, there were some people who in the DA wanted him to focus on the urban areas, the suburban areas, instead of the areas where there's poor people like the townships. Is that what you're alluding to, that maybe he didn't manage the needs of that constituency within the DA better?
Yes. I think that one can't ignore your established urban middle-class constituencies, traditionally the core voting bloc for the DA. And if they sense that their needs aren't being met in terms of fixing potholes, electricity outages, a whole range of issues, rubbish collection, then it creates tension for the party. So the balancing act of using resources to build up previous disadvantaged communities, which no one would dispute, and at the same time meeting the needs of your traditional rate-paying base, is something that could have been done better. And a lot of antagonism, I think, in the DA in terms of councillors getting heat from voters, in terms of the non-addressing of a number of service delivery issues. And I think that that's an important factor that's behind this. And there are a range of other issues as well.
Yeah, now one of the other issues he mentioned was race. He said he cannot reconcile himself with the view that says race is irrelevant in discussing the future of this country.
Sure, and that's uncontroversial, I think. I think very few people would say that it is irrelevant. Even the faction aligned to or fighting with the DA from the Institute of Race Relations are not denying race. They just have a different conceptualization of how...
Ivor, what's this IRR, Institute of Race Relations thing with the DA and the impact? I mean, how should we understand this dynamic? Because in my view from far is that it's an institute that should be on its own independent, doing research about race relations in South Africa. Now we see that Helen Zille is there, and people are saying, no, but you can see this thing is in the pocket of the DA or some elements of the DA.
So we always talk about the tripartite alliance with the ANC and its alliance partners. And we haven't looked closely enough at the DA and its alliance partners. So there's the Helen Suzman Foundation. There's the Institute of Race Relations. And there are a range of...
So they're part of the DA ecosystem. So we need to understand them like
yes.
that. Okay.
And they're a lobby group that has been pushing in the same way COSATU pushes and tries to influence decisions. They've been doing the same.
It's interesting how Herman Mashaba also used this when he was saying goodbye as he was resigning to point out some of his successes in the city of Joburg. And I've seen on Twitter, I'm just looking at my phone now, the city of Joburg, just to read it, let's just talk about that kind of thing, because he didn't balance certain things, but he's claiming success. For example, City of Joburg also on their Twitter handle tweeting elements of his speech. You haven't seen them, but I'll read them very quickly. I'm finding it fascinating that he's saying, I've performed better than any other mayor before me. Our diversification of housing has seen the rollout of the largest site and service project in the history of the city, with more than 4,000 service stands due in this financial year alone. Our forensics unit has set the standard in the fight against corruption and wrongdoing. Over 6,000 cases under investigation, totaling more than 35 billion in expenditure. This unit has managed hundreds of arrests and dismissals of corrupt officials. The council has approved the expropriation of 37 abandoned factories across the city. The list goes on and on and on. I mean, he uses the opportunity to say, but guys, in 3 years, I've delivered.
Yes, and he's absolutely right. His achievements are in many ways quite spectacular, and he deserves credit for the efforts he's put in. And it would be mean-spirited of anyone to deny that he has had successes in a range of areas. But of course, at a speech like this, he's going to focus on his successes. We wouldn't expect anything else. It doesn't mean that that's the whole story. It means that there's a whole range of other things going on, part of this undercurrent that I've mentioned.
And that undercurrent, Ivor, is more political than anything. Eh? Is it because how he's managed to strike a deal with the EFF, for example, in running the city council, and also, as you said earlier, alienating the DA, traditional core DA constituency in the burbs?
Yes. And the voting patterns are very clear on all of this. You can't hide away from voting numbers. It's like a business can't hide away from return on investment. It's the same thing. It's an objective measure of success and failure. And if the numbers go down, you're in trouble. We've seen that with by-elections, and we saw that in 2019. So despite all these efforts of Mayor Mashaba, it hasn't translated into significant votes and traction in the Johannesburg area. And that's clear from the 2019 elections broken down to Johannesburg. You would expect to see the numbers go up in black areas and in white areas. They go down.
Yeah. So there was a big loss there.
There's something.
Yes. Now,
that's counter.
Now, still on Joburg, it is a coalition after all.
Yes.
And he said the coalitions are the future of the country. How should we interpret him making that statement? Is it because there could be an undercurrent that maybe he didn't manage the coalition well, or he favored EFF too much in Johannesburg?
Well, there's lots of discussion, there's lots of speculation, rumours, and us analysts hear things about the engagement with the EFF that alienated not just DA members and office bearers, but citizens and voters in Johannesburg. And things happening and statements being made, and the sudden racialization of Mayor Mashaba's discourse. I think that scared a lot of people off. Most recently, an unfortunate statement on social media about white residents in Johannesburg, which he did apologize for. But we see his threshold of keeping race out of his political discourse becoming lower and lower, and the hostility emerging. And I think that alienated a large number of people.
Okay, let's bring in Samgele Masego.